Hello and welcome to the show.
Hello and welcome to All Geeks Aside, the podcast where I take you on an in-universe history of a character, group of characters, or an object like we had last week of all things geek, be it from comics, manga, science fiction, fantasy, and everything in between. Now, with the release of the movie Red Sparrow and the upcoming release of Avengers Infinity War closing in on us, I have decided to do one of the most sought-after women in the Marvel Universe. And while she is not originally a hero, she has become one of the mainstays in all things Avengers and S.H.I.E.L.D. And with the relationship between the United States and Russia at an all-time high, they did help us with our last presidential election after all, I have decided to do a Russian spy. Yes, I am doing the Russian super spy, Natasha Romanova, aka Black Widow. We will look into how she became an Avenger, how she defected from the Russians, and how she planned to kill Captain America. So how does a former Russian super spy become both a member of S.H.I.E.L.D. as well as a prominent comrade to the Avengers? To answer that, we will first need to look at where Natasha came from and what occurred in the years of her life. Natasha's history has changed over the years, so I'm going to tell you the one that most resonated with me. And first off, this is not from the movies. Little to no information is known about where Natasha comes from in the movies. Reasons why we need a Black Widow movie to come out pretty soon. But this is close to the Ultimate Universe, so if you want to read more about her, I would start in the Ultimate Universe and it will cross over with the movies. Now enough with that. Natasha was born in Stalingrad, now known as Volgograd, in the early part of the 20th century. But it is during the bombing campaign of the 1940s that all of Natasha's future was decided. During this campaign, a bomb took Natasha's whole life from her and flung her into the arms of one Ivan Petrov at a tender age of around 8 or 9. Petrov took Natasha into his heart and began to raise her as his own. But Ivan worked for the Russian military. Now here's where things get a little tricky. There are two stories of how she came to train as a super spy. And in the nature of a spy, her beginning has been covered by a haze of lies with slivers of truth sprinkled in to keep the story straight in the teller's mind. In one beginning, Natasha lost her parents due to a bomb killing them both, while in another, she is given to Ivan by her mother to take care of because they feared the worst, with the Germans at the gates and the city about to be overrun. This operation would later be known as the Battle of Stalingrad. Now, the history of World War II in this universe is very similar to our own, as can be seen in the depiction of the real Battle of Stalingrad. The Battle of Stalingrad was a major confrontation of World War II, in which Nazi Germany and its allies fought the Soviet Union for control of the city of Stalingrad in southern Russia, marked by fierce close-quarter combat and direct assaults on civilians in air raids. It is often regarded as the single largest and bloodiest battle in the history of warfare. It was extremely costly to both the Germans and the Russians, and the Army High Command had to withdraw vast military forces from the West to replace these losses. The German offense to capture Stalingrad began in August of roughly 1942, using the 6th Army and elements of the 4th Panzer Army. The attack was supported by intense Luftwaffe bombing and reduced much of the city to rubble. The fighting degenerated into house-to-house fighting. Both sides poured reinforcements into the city, and by mid-November, the Germans had pushed the Soviet defenders back at great cost into narrow zones along the west bank of the Volga River. In November of 1942, the Red Army launched Operation Uranus, a two-pronged attack targeting the weaker Romanian and Hungarian armies protecting the German Sixth Army's flanks. The Axis forces on the flanks were overrun and the Sixth Army was cut off and surrounded in Stalingrad. Adolf Hitler ordered the army stay in Stalingrad and make no attempt to break out. Instead, attempts were made to supply the army by air and to break the encirclement from outside. Heavy fighting continued for another 2 months. By the beginning of February the next year, the Axis forces in Stalingrad had exhausted their ammunition and food. The remaining units of the Sixth Army surrendered. As you can see, the Russians fight tooth and nail for their city. Stalingrad is, after all, named after Stalin, and the Germans didn't stand a chance. So either way we look at it, Natasha was now in the care of Ivan, who was acting as a father figure to this confused little girl. During the post-war era in Russia, we saw a lot of people feeling that they needed to protect the motherland from outside forces from infiltrating their borders ever again. And with this in mind, Natasha was recruited to the super-secret Red Room. The Red Room was Russians' version of the Canadian Department K, so therefore the Black Widow program is their version of Weapon X program. And the Red Room's main function was to create a group of super spies to infiltrate both the West as well as China. The girls were taken at a young age and changed. Not just their memories, but their whole genetic makeup was altered. But these girls need to be able to infiltrate, so they were given false memories as being ballet dancers. During Natasha's stay at the Red Room, she was trained in all forms of martial arts, including karate, judo, jiu-jitsu, boxing, aikido, ninjutsu, and various other forms of kung fu and kempo. She is also a marksman or markswoman, whichever one you prefer, and became a weapons specialist, having extensive espionage training included in there as well. And she was also trained by the ultimate Russian super soldier. That would be the Winter Soldier Bucky Barnes, before his defection to the West. Also, in the movie Civil War, you can see some kind of interaction between Natasha and Bucky in Civil War movie during that breakout scene. I will be honest, I don't know what the conversation they had, but they should have known each other. Now, like I said earlier, not only did she receive training to be a super spy, she was also genetically enhanced to make her a better spy. As a result, she was resistant to aging as well as diseases, had a higher healing rate than normal, as well as psychological conditioning that suppresses her memories of true events as opposed to the implanted ones, without the aid of any specially designed system of drug suppressants, which is great for a spy to have. The white blood cells in her body were also more efficient at fighting off any microbes, foreign bodies, and other forms of poisons from her body, keeping her healthy and immune to most, if not all, infections, diseases, and disorders. Pity that Alexander Litvenko didn't have this enhancement in 2006 when he was, quote-unquote, poisoned. Her agility is also enhanced. Her physical agilities, her physical strength, and all this, she is said to have been in as good a shape as an Olympic medalist. She can coordinate her body with balance, flexibility, and dexterity quite easily. And you can see that extensively in the movies as she literally takes out whole security squads as well as highly trained mercenaries with ease. Natasha was married at one point. She was married to a Russian Air Force pilot, test pilot, by the name of Alexei Shostakov. Now, being a test pilot, he was the pride of Mother Russia. But the Russian military had other plans for him and wanted to turn him into their newest super soldier. He was told in order to do so, he would no longer be permitted to have any contact with his wife, Natasha. As is customary in these occasions, there is an elaborate plan where Alexei seemingly dies in a plane crash, and then he goes off to be trained as the new super soldier for the Mother Russia, known as the Red Guardian. So, back to Natasha and her many missions. or dance recitals, which is her cover, so therefore it would be correct. While she was in the employ of the KGB, she was a model spy. She was sent to the United States to deal with the Russian scientist and inventor Anton Vanko, who had defected, and after he had created the Crimson Dynamo armor. It was quite similar to the armor of Iron Man, only much, much larger, since that's what the Russians tend to do. Natasha was aided on this mission by a one Boris Turgenov. However, during the mission, both Boris and Anton were sadly killed, and the dynamo armor had been destroyed in the process. During this time, Natasha has lots of interactions with Tony Stark Iron Man, especially in her early days with the KGB, so that they could try and acquire the armor for their own nefarious purposes. So she was not always working alone. She does convince the master archer, Hawkeye, also known as Clint Barton, to help steal from Tony, since she is quite skilled at getting people, especially men, to do things that she wanted them to do. And Clint did have the unfortunate luck of falling in love with Natasha. So when the pair were battling Iron Man and Natasha gets injured, Clint abandoned the heist to get Natasha to safety. But being a brainwashed super spy has the benefit of not having any feelings for anything or anyone. But as Pat Benatar once said, love is a battlefield after all. She continues to fight alongside Clint and begins to have feelings for him. And this was bad. For when her Russian overlords learned that she, the once vicious Black Widow, was now in love with a Westerner, they felt that her love for Mother Russia was waning. And she is brutally attacked by some unnamed assailants and ended up shot and in hospital. The Red Room needed to get her back to normal and tried to brainwash her back into her vodka-loving self. They kidnapped her and put her back under their control. It is then that she once again attacks the Western heroes. This time, she takes on the Avengers, and she is not alone. Fighting by her side, be it for money, was Power Man and Swordsman. But love is a fickle thing. While Black Widow was brainwashed once again, her love was buried. But Clint's love, on the other hand, was not. It was still bubbling at the surface. And at this time, Clint was a member of the Avengers and facing against the love of his life. But it is this love that causes Clint to be able to break the mind control that the Red Room had over her and bring her back to him. With the mind control broken, Natasha was free to be a hero, having some collaborations with Spider-Man as well as Daredevil, but ultimately becoming a full-time member of the Avengers. But how was a once super spy who actually faced off against the Avengers able to join them? To begin with, she actually had to interview. But how does one interview for a spot on the Avengers? Well, she aided them in defeating the Ultroids, who were an army of robots under the control of Ixar. To defeat the Ultroids' leader and ensure that they would never return to Earth and threaten their planet once again, Natasha threatened to kill their leader, Ixar. And this was, unfortunately, 100% against Avengers protocol. It was, luckily, that Hawkeye was the only one that was fully aware of what transpired, and Hawkeye covered it up, and Natasha was granted membership to the Avengers. This would not last very long, and S.H.I.E.L.D., Nick Fury from S.H.I.E.L.D. actually, needed Natasha to infiltrate her former master's circle. But in order to do so, she had to make it publicly known that she was not good. This caused an uproar, and the news had her depicted as a criminal, which was made public to the international news, and her membership to the Avengers was revoked. Hawkeye's heart was broken once again, but Natasha's mission for S.H.I.E.L.D. was put in jeopardy when her former masters didn't fully trust her and hooked her up to the machine to brainwash her once again. This time, however, Natasha's mind and spirit were too strong, and the brainwashing didn't take. Therefore, to keep her in line and in some form of docile state, she was gassed and locked away in a cell. Hawkeye learned of the whole mission from S.H.I.E.L.D. and that the love of his life was now working under orders from Nick Fury and was in the clutches of the communist. Clint petitioned for the Avengers to step in and rescue Natasha. The Avengers searched for Natasha and they found that she was being held, and they faced off against Natasha's angry ex-husband. Unknowing to them at this time, and Natasha, they faced off against Red Guardian, who was Russia's answer to Captain America. During the fight, Red Guardian reveals his true identity to her and she is caught off guard. However, she was the one who defeated her estranged husband, who was meant to be dead, and he sadly died in this fight. Maybe for good this time. After her rescue, Natasha would return to the Avengers. But her return was short-lived, and she decided to give up on costumed heroics, and Black Widow accepted another assignment from S.H.I.E.L.D., this time to prevent Egghead from using an orbital platform to hold the world at ransom. During this fight, she was captured, promoting Hawkeye, who obviously still loved her, to use Henry Pym's growth-enhancing suit to become the new Goliath and rescue her. But Clint was not alone, the Avengers were with him, and she aided the Avengers in stopping Egghead, although it ended in the seeming death of Egghead and Goliath's brother Barney. After a prolonged absence, the Black Widow eventually ended her relationship with Goliath Hawkeye. It must have been a great fall to have loved someone and have a huge heart broken in such a manner. Natasha was not able to avoid superheroics for long. It is now that we get the first glimpse of Black Widow costume that we all know and love. After designing a sleek black costume and adapting her bracelets with electric widow bites that are capable of incapacitating even the angriest of Hulks, she sought to prove herself as a capable adventurer by besting Spider-Man in a battle. Although Spider-Man at the time was sick and not at his peak performance, he was still able to beat Black Widow. However, this did not stop Natasha from continuing her dream of retribution and having a career in the hero business. During this time, she mostly clashed with underworld figures, gangsters, and some D-class costume villains. Most notably, Astrologer and Watchlord, two villains that I'm not even sure I remember. The Black Widow soon became a pawn manipulated by a computer known as Ball. He was from the distant future of Earth 71778, and in that reality mankind was made extinct. And the past history of Daredevil and Black Widow played a crucial role in this. This ultimately led to a long relationship and partnership between the two heroes, Daredevil and Black Widow. But it eventually came to an end, as all things do, especially when it's Natasha Romanova. Natasha once again starts working for S.H.I.E.L.D., and she is briefly incarcerated as part of a Hydra plot to infiltrate and brainwash S.H.I.E.L.D., causing her to regress to an old cover identity, that of a schoolteacher known as Nancy Rushman. This was one of her many former cover stories from her time in the Red Room. Fortunately, she was discovered and rescued by Spider-Man, who could never forget fighting such a great opponent. Following her rescue, she began to team up with Spider-Man, along with Nick Fury and Shang-Chi, who is not a major player if I'm actually completely honest. And after Hydra's plot was thwarted by Natasha, she did admit that the Nancy identity was in fact attracted to Spider-Man, even if she preferred to retain her independence. Natasha wanted to remain a hero but wanted to distance herself from both S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Avengers. So where does a hot Russian go when they want to break out on their own? Why, Los Angeles, of course. But Natasha did not want to break into acting or stand-up comedy. Could you imagine the jokes that she would have told? An American and a Russian are arguing about which country has more freedom. The American says, I can walk right up to the White House and shout, "Down with Donald Trump," and nothing will happen to me. The Russian replies, "Guess what? I can walk in front of the Kremlin and shout, 'Down with Donald Trump,' and nothing will happen to me either." So there you have it. Russian jokes aren't very funny after all, I guess. No, she went there to prove that she was, in fact, a hero, and that she was more than just a super spy, that she was capable of being a hero. And therefore, she kind of fell into a new team known as the Champions of Los Angeles. Now, they formed out of a need to protect the weak, with several heroes meeting by chance against a great threat, and this threat was the Greek god of death, Pluto. The group consisted of 2 former X-Men, namely Angel and Iceman. Their muscle was the Greek demigod of strength, Hercules, as well as the spirit of vengeance, Johnny Blaze, Ghost Rider, and Black Widow was their team leader. After defeating the Greek god Pluto, not the Mickey Mouse dog, the Greek god, the misfit team, the Champions, remained as a team in the city of Los Angeles. Now, for their valiant efforts, they were granted a public dedication by the mayor and people of Los Angeles, and it quickly turned into a different kind of party when the whole shindig was targeted by Griffin, Titanium Man, and the Crimson Dynamo. As with all teams, be it the Avengers, the Fantastic Four, or even the Justice League, somebody needs to bankroll them. In this case, it was Angel, whose real name was Warren Worthington III. And with his money, they bought a surplus Avengers Quinjet and they renamed it the Champ Jet. And this was used to transport them on all of their missions. And they also did purchase some more gadgets along the way. Now, Black Widow is never able to be on a team with any male characters and not form some kind of relationship. And in this case, it is no different. Black Widow never seemed to want to be left alone for too long with Hercules. She feared the worst. And even if the relationships never really last very long, this relationship with Hercules, whatever it may have been at the time, never really hindered their working relationship. And the group worked from time to time with another character known as Black Goliath, who was their scientific expertise. Unfortunately, this team was no Avengers and it was short-lived. The Champions did once fight against the Incredible Hulk, who was, at the time, unknown to them, that Bruce was trying to save his cousin Jennifer, who needed a blood transfusion, since she was injured, and he was trying to get his injured cousin Jennifer to a hospital for said blood transfusion. Inadvertently, Bruce Wayne ended up giving her his blood, and she was turned into the She-Hulk. The Champions briefly reunited a couple of times. Most famously, they teamed up with X-Force to battle their old foe, Pluto. I'm not sure if Deadpool was a member of X-Force at the time, but I would have loved to have seen an interaction between Deadpool and Natasha. After their dissolution, the Champions became a object of ridicule, how would I say it, with Iceman recalling the team as an embarrassment, and Angel calling the team a nightmare. We just didn't know what we were doing. Despite this, the 2 recent teams courted the name as their own. That is, the Champions name. The California branch of the 50-state initiative was originally to be named the Champions, but it was quickly changed to the Order, and also the team first known as the Great Lakes Avengers changed their name to the unused Great Lakes Champions during a poker tournament held by The Thing, although they later switched it back. With 2 failures under her belt, Natasha decided that it was best to remain a lone wolf in the world. She wanted to show S.H.I.E.L.D. that there was more to her, and she was targeted by a villain by the name of Damon Dran, who lured her to her capture on his island by kidnapping her friend Ivan, her ex-husband. His plan was to use his army of female warriors to defeat her, and once defeated, he was going to send a body double of Natasha to assassinate S.H.I.E.L.D. leader Nick Fury. Unfortunately for Damon, this plan didn't go so well, and she single-handedly defeated the entire army. Once she was making her escape, she called Nick Fury and told him everything that was going on, and he owed her a favor, and he proceeded to bomb the island. A chance investigation brought Natasha into contact with a group known as the Hand, who were a ninja order that served a demon referred to its members as the Beast. You should remember the Hand from the Daredevil Netflix series. The Hand's attempt was to spread its dark influence over the world and to have led them into battle with countless times through the century. There was only one group that could stop and keep them at bay, and that was the Chaste. During this investigation, Natasha was struck down with a fatal poison and unfortunately died. So that's it. But Daredevil, like I said, is one who stands up against the Hand most times, and Daredevil's ally at the time was a man known as Stone, who was a member of the Chaste, and he somehow mystically resurrected Natasha. Natasha then joins the two men in battling the Hand, seemingly thwarting the ninja clan's effort to similarly resurrect the Daredevil's long-lost love, that is, Elektra Natchios. Unfortunately, she is also revived, and this time she's pissed. And we should remember this from the Daredevil series. This must be where they got that storyline from. By now, Daredevil had rekindled his relationship with an earlier lover, Karen Page, whose life Natasha had saved once. Natasha, after this, gets drawn back into the Avengers. And at the time, there's a major crisis going on, known as Acts of Vengeance, and a series of attacks from Atlantis that had been orchestrated to restore one of the elder gods known as Seth. And she gained a new, far different ally at this time. She is joined by the Punisher, and they are facing off against the Sunrise Society, a group who were formed sometime during World War II, which is why Natasha didn't like them too much. After Russian dissidents manipulated her into some crime, using an android version of her ex-husband, Alexei, Natasha revisited another piece of her past by reuniting with a longtime friend. She reunites with Logan, who is now a member of Charles Xavier's X-Men and under the new name Wolverine. He is no longer with Department K, and they are going off to face against the Hand in Madripoor. Now, just in case you don't know what Madripoor is, it is a fictional area located in South Asia in the vicinity of Singapore and is a popular vacation destination for the criminal class as they do not extradite under any circumstances. Soon after this, she would rejoin the Avengers, this time full-time, when they were reorganized under the United Nations Charter, becoming Captain America's deputy leader. Between missions, she and an old friend known as Darkstar, who was also a Russian, who had succeeded her ex-husband as the Red Guardian. Now, one of the things that all spies, particularly those of the Russian variety, have to worry about is that they are sleeper agents. It was a big deal during the Cold War, waiting for that one day that your activation sequence will be uttered and they would enact the mission that they were set out to do. And Natasha was no exception, and her sleeper persona was known as October, and it was activated. And it was Tony Stark that helped her overcome and break that brainwashing. Despite her duties at this time with the Avengers, when they would face off against such villains as Thanos, the Mole Man, and many others, Natasha still found the time for some occasional government work. One such time was when Daredevil battled the telepathic Rose, who had slaughtered a number of S.H.I.E.L.D. telepathic agents. Think the men who stare at goats but actual telepaths. And soon after this, she once more returned to Russia to investigate increasing activity of the nation's mobsters. Some of them, perhaps, among her communist overseers, only to be caught in a battle between the decades-old vigilante known as Night Raven. Circumstances force her to side with S.H.I.E.L.D. against Wolverine when the latter is freed from S.H.I.E.L.D. custody, and the feral young woman Lynx, who was briefly programmed with a false S.H.I.E.L.D. identity, was once used by Natasha herself. Nevertheless, Natasha's heart was not in the endeavor, and when Wolverine found her a safe haven, Lynx a safe haven, she and Nick Fury toasted their mutual friend's success. Now, as with all co-deputy leaders, sometimes you get promoted. And Black Widow was promoted to co-leader, managing ops at home base, while the Black Knight would lead in the field. When the majority of the Avengers were killed at the hand of Onslaught, who, I'm sure as we all know, was the psionic entity that came into being when Charles Xavier absorbed Magneto's dark ego. I would like to cover Onslaught, so that's all I'm going to leave on that one. Natasha was unable to rebuild the team while fighting off lawsuits at the time. You see, Tony Stark at this time is dead, and the Maria Stark Foundation was formed, and their money from the Maria Stark Foundation was what was used to fund the Avengers. And she left the Avengers to just dissolve. The Black Widow, Natasha, at this time then vowed to get vengeance on all of the Avengers' former foes. And at the time, she ran into Daredevil while he was hunting a villain known as Grey Gargoyle. Matt Murdock, Daredevil, feared that Natasha's mental state was a little bit obsessive about how she was going to bring down Gargoyle with him. And as he attempted to help her, his girlfriend, Karen Page, became increasingly jealous and angry. And Natasha acknowledges this and acknowledges that Matt's love for Karen, and she leaves. Later, Natasha would even offer to help Karen clear her name from a murder that she was being framed for. Now, with all heroes, they're never truly dead, and the Avengers are no exception. And when the once dead Avengers came back to life, nobody was more relieved than Natasha. It is now that she turned her super spy skills to good use and went to work for S.H.I.E.L.D. instead, assisting them in destroying such criminal masterminds as the Freedom Light Foundation, while pretending to be Ebon Flame, a character that I could not find much information on. The Red Room, where Natasha learned her skills, was still active, after she had believed that they were no longer functioning as a government project, and they were still brainwashing and still training females after Natasha defected to the West. Their mission was to create another Black Widow, one better than Natasha, but they did create another Black Widow. But this Black Widow proved to be nothing like the original and proved no match for Natasha herself. The new Black Widow's name was Yelena Belaya. I'm not a Russian. I'm not very good at Russian names, so I apologize if during this whole thing I have destroyed any. Now, a lot of Natasha's dealings were with government agents and governments in general, and when the government of Bulgaria would capture Madame Hydra and requested an exchange with the United States for Black Widow, something was awry. As part of a sting to find out who it was and what was going on to allow Natasha to be exchanged, Daredevil and S.H.I.E.L.D. teamed up with Natasha and found out that it was, in fact, Natasha's ex-husband, Alexei, who had orchestrated the entire exchange. Alongside the Avengers, S.H.I.E.L.D., and Daredevil, Natasha rescued or took into custody, whichever way you want to look at it, Alexei. The stress now of seeing her once dead, once living, once dead, once robot, now alive again husband, drove Natasha away from the Avengers and from S.H.I.E.L.D., and she went into retirement. But again, hero retirements are always short-lived. And she did, however, live for a short time in Arizona before agents from the Red Room began tracking all of the ex-Black Widow agents and killing them. Natasha recruits an associate from S.H.I.E.L.D. and attempts to track down the killers. In her hunting, she found Sally Ann Carter, as well as Antonov Kudrin, who were former head of biotech for the Red Room. It turned out that the Black Widows included no less than 27 girls who were trained to be perfect killers. They were all implanted with false memories, psychochemical conditioning, as well as chemically enhanced to be loyal and perform perfectly for the program. They were even given pheromonal locks and keys to keep them as a control mechanism and to keep them from rebelling. While taking Ludmila to S.H.I.E.L.D., Natasha learned that Nick Fury had once used the same pheromonal key to make her defect from her home country and begin working for S.H.I.E.L.D. She also learned that Sally Ann was kidnapped at this time and that her friend and associate Phil had been killed. But this did not stop Natasha. She continued to investigate, and the trail of the Black Widow killings led to an operative from the Red Room and to the CEO of Gynecon, Ian McMasters. Natasha caught up with them on his yacht and killed them both for targeting her sisters. This, in turn, made Natasha one of the most wanted criminals in the United States, but she had her retribution. Natasha was now on the run from the law, and she only had one friend that she could turn to. She went and looked for the help of Yelena Vallejo in Cuba. At this time, Yelena was running a lingerie company as well as a soft porn TV channel at the time. In return for a place to stay, Yelena asked Natasha for help. She was looking for some help exporting stolen medical supplies from Miami. To her surprise, Natasha found that the medical supplies were from Gynecon and that Sally Ann was actually not dead and was kidnapped by the mafia. Kestrel and Martin Ferris captured Natasha in Miami and attempted to alter her mind using drugs to find out what she knew. But as we know, none of this would work on Natasha due to her conditioning at the Red Room. With the help of Yelena, Daredevil rescued Natasha, who had tracked down and killed Kestrel and Ferris. In all the craziness, Natasha learned that Sally Ann had been experimented on by Gynecon, but she had in fact escaped. And now we have to talk about a series of events that affect all of those Avengers and Fantastic Four and most US governments, in fact world governments as a whole, and that is the Secret War. Well, this is when Doctor Doom was giving weapons and technology to some B-class villains, and Widow was sent to investigate. She ends up tracking down a villain known as Tinkerer. She disguises herself in a burqa and tracks him down to the castle known as Lucia von Bardas, the current Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Latveria. She informs S.H.I.E.L.D. of this, and the President refused Nick Fury's request for a S.H.I.E.L.D.-focused overthrow of von Bardas. Nick Fury is now forced to act alone, and he gathers some heroes to take on the Latvian Prime Minister, along with Black Widow, Captain America, Spider-Man, Luke Cage, Daredevil, Wolverine, and Daisy Johnson to overthrow von Bardas. Unfortunately, the heroes disapproved of bringing down Castle Doom on von Bardas, but afterwards, Nick Fury erases all of their memories of anyone who is not level 10 or above of everything that went on during the Secret War, which Black Widow was a level 10 participant. And now we have something that really annoyed me about the movies was Civil War in general. During the superhero Civil War in the Marvel Universe, Natasha became a supporter of the Superhuman Registration Act and was a member of the task force led by Iron Man. Afterwards, Natasha does allow herself to be registered and joins the reconstituted Avengers. Natasha was still one of the most sought after espionage agents alive, and was recruited by Iron Man and Miss Marvel to be the newest team Avenger, alongside with Sentry, Ares, the Wasp, and Wonder Man. And when the new director of S.H.I.E.L.D., Tony Stark, was presumed killed and the deputy director Maria Hill incapacitated, Natasha assumed temporary command of S.H.I.E.L.D. as the highest ranking agent present at the time. Natasha was among the Avengers who were affected, along with hundreds of New York citizens, by the symbiote virus, but they were all cured by Iron Man. The symbiotes, if nobody knows, are a alien symbiote that, when attaches to a human host, gives them insane powers and takes over their personality almost entirely. One of the most popular and most famous symbiotes would be Venom, which is coming out in a movie sometime in the future. Natasha became very suspicious, as she always is, of certain people that were around her. One of the people that she became suspicious of was Jessica Drew. Now, Jessica Drew, if you are not fully aware, is Spider-Woman. And it turns out that she was, in fact, a Skrull imposter. These Skrulls will come up in another episode. We're not going to get into them now, it's way too much. After this, Natasha goes and assumes the identity of her friend Yelena to infiltrate Norman Osborn's newly formed super villain group known as the Thunderbolts, under the behest of Nick Fury. Osborn discovered her breaking into an abandoned S.H.I.E.L.D. facility and offered her a position of field lead. On her first mission, she and Ant-Man took control of Air Force One, with Goblin, Doc Samson, and the new president on board. Osborn began impersonating Fury in the messages to set Natasha up in order to strengthen the Thunderbolts and lead him to Fury. Osborn ordered her to lead the current Thunderbolts to kill former Thunderbolt, known as Songbird. Fury's orders Yelena, Natasha, to rescue and retrieve Songbird to get information that she might possess about Osborn and his ongoing operations. Natasha found Songbird and revealed to her that she was, in fact, Natasha Romanova and not Yelena, and she was in disguise. She tried delivering Songbird to Fury, but the Thunderbolts also followed them. The trio were now captured, as Osborn revealed that he had been impersonating Fury in the messages all along, and he ordered the team to execute Natasha and Songbird. But they somehow managed to escape when Ant-Man, Headsman, and Paladin turned on the rest of the Thunderbolts and let them go. After being rescued by Mach 5 and Fixer, they learned that the Fury Osborn was actually an android. After this, Natasha went back to working with S.H.I.E.L.D. and she was framed in a plot targeting global spies. She was being accused of assassinating a U.S. senator by the name of Whit Crane. The senator's son, Nick, was captured by a rival female spy who wanted him as a source for implicating Natasha. Natasha stole Nick away from her and took him to a secret CIA base to scare him into giving her his source instead. But the plan backfired when they were both attacked. Natasha and Nick did manage to escape, but while in Poland, which is where the secret CIA base was, they were attacked by Phantasma and the Crimson Dynamo once again. Natasha was able to take down the Crimson Dynamo, but Phantasm was taken out by an old friend of Natasha's known as Fatale. Fatale revealed that she had been hired to kill Whit Crane, but found he had already taken his own life and needed to use Nick to track down who had actually paid for the hit. Nick gave them the source name of Sadko, but when they arrived, it was a trap, wired with explosives, and they were forced to try and escape once again. The conspiracy against spies turned out to be wider, and Natasha encountered Mockingbird and Hawkeye on the same trail in Russia, where they found many trainee spies and a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent had been killed. Soon they were attacked by Purin, Crimson Dynamo, Phantasm, and Sputnik. They showed up to apprehend Hawkeye, believing him to be the Ronin behind the spy deaths. Discovering this was merely a diversion, the three heroes and Dominic Fortune alerted the true target, an ambassador in St. Petersburg, Russia. They next traveled to Japan, where Dominic and Mockingbird discover an amusing battle force on the Russian coast where the northern Japanese islands were, while Natasha and Hawkeye track down the Madam, an old ninja working with the new Ronin to bring about this Russian attack. The four heroes meet up on the disputed island where they met the Ronin, who was revealed to be none other than Natasha's ex-husband Alexei. His plan was to kill off the world's intelligence operatives, leaving countries blind while he made his attacks and brought the four heroes to him so he could kill them. Alexei planned to set off volcanoes on the island, but Natasha and the others used the lava to defeat his forces. He was then defeated by Natasha. Her friend and temporary ally, Phantasma, used his powers to hypnotize him into seeing Natasha's death, allowing the real Natasha to take him down and take him out completely. Now we all know Thor, and we know where Thor lives, in Asgard. After the siege of Asgard, which is a great battle, which will be coming up in great detail in the future, Black Widow joins Commander Rogers, the new secret Avenger, and becomes an Avenger once again. This time, she takes up residence at Stark Tower after it had been rebuilt. She teams up with Spider-Man to take out the Sinister Six's latest incarnation. The Sinister Six did manage to take out most of the Avengers, and all that remained at the time was Spider-Man, Black Widow, and the Silver Sable. When the Avengers fight the X-Men, Natasha sides with her fellow Avengers. And after the war, she was called up to join the primary Avenger squad once again. Months pass, and she is asked when S.H.I.E.L.D. take over, she is asked to help the Avengers and S.H.I.E.L.D. find the Illuminati and bring them into custody. Black Widow leaves the team at this point and joined Sunspot's new Avengers. When the Illuminati and the Avengers set their differences aside at the time, in light of imminent destruction of the universe as a result of the multiversal phenomenon known as the incursion. Now, the incursion, which I know I have talked about in previous episodes, was when two Earths from different dimensions were on a collision course, and this caused the destruction of both Earths. But a new reality was brought into being, and Doctor Doom was Emperor of the whole place. Black Widow was tasked with bringing select people aboard the Future Foundation's life raft, which were capable of withstanding said explosion. When the final incursion was coming to a close, Widow's ship was unfortunately damaged, and Natasha died in the ensuing explosion. Following the eventual restoration of the multiverse, I know I have talked about it in the past, Natasha left the Avengers and returned to a life of spying once again. Black Widow at this time was forced to betray and defect from S.H.I.E.L.D. when a new adversary, known as the Weeping Lion, blackmailed her. In an ensuing mission, Natasha discovered the existence of a Dark Room Academy, founded by the Red Room's former headmistress. After turning the tables on the Weeping Lion and getting him to work for her, Black Widow did some further investigation into the Dark Room, and she manages to stop an assassination attempt in the White House from Dark Room recruits, and subsequently prevents the headmistress' daughter Anya from compromising S.H.I.E.L.D., freeing the remaining recruits from the Dark Room's grasp and driving them to a path of recovery, thus clearing her name in the process. Now, I know everyone here loves Captain America. None, even I do. But when it was revealed that he in fact was a Hydra agent, we all but lost it. With Captain America's assistance, Hydra was able to take control of the United States. You will be glad to know, however, spoilers ahead, that Captain America turned over to the dark side was not really Captain America. But during the Hydra regime, Black Widow joined the last line of resistance. She joined the Underground. Having grown tired of the Underground's reluctance, however, she decided to take an extreme approach and to end Captain America even after his regime had leveled Las Vegas. The resistance didn't want to take any part of it. Natasha was going to kill Captain America. But she wasn't going to be alone at this time. She was joined by a group known as the Champions. Not the same champions as before. This group of champions is made up of Miss Marvel, but not the flying super strong Miss Marvel. This was Kamala Khan, the stretchy Miss Marvel. Miles Morales, Spider-Man. Nova of the Nova Corps, and Amadeus Cho, who was the Iron Spider. Of course, over the following weeks, Natasha did train the champions in hopes to prepare them for what lay ahead. These kids were not killers, but she, on the other hand, had no qualms about killing, and she intended to take out Captain America herself. You see, a premonition from a Ulysses Kane of the Inhumans brought to light that Spider-Man was the one to kill Captain America. Black Widow was going to try and take this burden away from these kids' shoulders. However, as all military tacticians know, the best laid plans of mice and men always go awry. And when a Hydra agent stepped in and caused Widow's plans to be moved forward, she was not capable of following through with her execution, which gave Spider-Man enough time to confront Captain America alone. While Steve and Spider-Man were trading blows, Black Widow stepped in for Spider-Man's safety, and she ends up taking a direct hit from Captain America's shield, which unfortunately broke her neck and killed her instantly. This caused Miles to snap, and he became enraged. Spider-Man, who arguably is one of the strongest superheroes in the Marvel Universe, proceeded to pound on Captain America like an angry bear chafed with sweat. But it is the intervention of Wasp who made him stop and see the error of what he was about to do. She convinced him not to follow Natasha's wish and avoid becoming an assassin like her. So that's it. Black Widow is dead. Or is she? Somehow, she is brought back to life, and she begins targeting those who had done her wrong in the past. She would, however, meet up with some of her old flames, Hawkeye and the Winter Soldier, in the future, and she proceeded to the one place where she could be safe and left alone. She headed to Madripoor, and that's where our story ends. Thank you for joining me on this great spy story, and I'll see you next time. If you want to request a character of your own, you can do so over on my social media. I am at All Geeks Aside on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. I will leave links in the show notes. If you would like some inspired t-shirts from all of my characters that I've done in the past, including this one, you head on over to my TeePublic store. You will be able to purchase shirts there and help out not only me, but other artists who have designed these t-shirts. Thanks for listening. See you next time.